Thank you for being here. Thank you for leading the group. Thank you for being involved in the life of our church in the way that you are, because it's absolutely crucial. So I want to show you a slide, some language that I heard that was kind of startling, and I want to make a point with it. Gospel doctrine, which is the truth about the gospel, without gospel culture, which is the realities of the gospel actually lived in life. Without that, what you have is gospel heresy. That's a really strong, get you kind of statement, but it's really true. And while I love Sunday mornings because they're often only a monologue, it's a joke. And but I love Sunday mornings because they're predictable. People come, we say and believe that real life change happens more deeply in group life because it's there that you get to demonstrate and put on display and exercise and begin to experience yourself and offer to others gospel realities of your life to other people. And so without that, dominant in our church, then we don't really have the full breadth of the gospel being played out. It's got to be it's got to be believed and then internalized, and then the implications of the gospel have to be lived out. And that's what you guys are providing, the atmospheres, the relationships, the time for that to happen. So absolutely critical to the health and life of any church, particularly our church. And when it comes to the 10-year vision, I want you to know this. It's impossible for us to achieve our 10-year vision. It's impossible without groups. There's no way that we can have the breadth or the depth in health and really minister to the number of people that we need to without groups. Now, I know all of our groups and every form, I don't think everyone is represented here. But that's our goal, is to get to a relaunch moments where everybody's together, we're celebrating, and we're taking off. But you need to know that critical to our 10-year vision is group life, because that is where so much of gospel culture is fostered, lived out, experienced, celebrated, and then ultimately spread about. And so I want to, say thanks, and I just want to I asked Tori, Dave, multiple times, what's my role today? And it's really to cheerlead that reality. And I'd like to do it by closing your time with just a simple passage and some observations I learned a long time ago that helped me. And it's nothing new that you haven't heard, but it's out of Luke chapter 6. And it's the rhythm of ministry of the Lord Jesus. And so he models it for us. And I have entitled this, When Ministry Becomes Inevitable. When ministry becomes inevitable. This is what it says, starting in verse 12 of chapter 6 of Luke's Gospel. One of those days, Jesus went out to the mountainside to pray, and he spent the night praying to God, all night. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he designated to be apostles. Then he names them. And then in verse 17 it says, he went down with them and stood on a level place, coming down out of the mountain. And a large crowd of his disciples were there, other than the 12. A great number of people from all over, Judea, from Jerusalem, from the coastal regions around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured. And the people all tried to touch him, Jesus, because power was coming from him and healing them all. So he starts at night. The movement is night, morning, afternoon. The movement starts where we all have to begin, in moments of solitude, where we hear the Lord. Hence our Hear Journal, the effort. We all have to start in those moments of solitude. Solitude is very different than loneliness. I know Dave talked about loneliness, But solitude is when you are alone with God, and that discipline, the spiritual discipline, is making room for God in your life where you're alone with Him. Some of us are better at being alone with God than others of us, but it's so critical that you have solitude in your life. And the observation that Henri Nouwen, who is now deceased, made is that when you're alone with God, you get to hear Him tell you something that is critical to who you are and your identity. And it is the basis for all spiritual ministry. It is to hear Him call you His beloved. What I mean by that is simply this. When I leave the presence of the Almighty God, I know that I am deeply loved. I'm cherished. He's on my side. He is my advocate. He is my ambassador. He is the one who's loved me with an enduring love. He's the one who gave Himself for me. And if we don't get there regularly enough, we struggle, do we not, with identity? Because the world around us is constantly trying to tell us who we are, who we need to become, who we were, and therefore who we still are. It just keeps coming. And so we're encouraging people all the time with a Hear Journal. Sit still, sit quiet enough, and learn to just be in a passage, be before the Lord. In creation, I find myself more and more drawn to I was noticing the ceiling this morning as I was sitting outside. That's a aviation term. What's the ceiling? How far can you see? And the clouds have been so low. And there was some high, and I was just like, oh, and I was talking to a Carolina wren this morning. We had a nice little conversation. Back and forth. I was just enjoying it. And you can't just stop there with creation. You've got to go and hear the Lord. I am His beloved. And see, when you know who you are, what it does is it keeps you grounded with enormous failure and enormous success. You know who you are. And what immediately happens is we long for community. It's born out of us. When we are filled up, it doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert. Once you're full, you long to be with others. I love Dave's point. The first problem was not sin. It was loneliness. Wow. Right? And so once we get together, and if you come into community full, you're a different person than if you come empty. If you come empty, then you come into community wanting that community to give you only what God can give you, and they can't give it to you. It's like the suction of a vacuum. And we all have had people in our groups that they walk through the door and they're an immediate drain. They just take every emotion in the room, every conversation in the room, every problem in the room. It's just wow. But if we can come to community full, now we're in a position to do something Nouwen says that can only happen in Christian community. I tend to agree. Forgive and celebrate. We talked about celebration. Eric and Allison talked about that as a key part. But having a hard conversation is a conversation about forgiveness. And I like how Nouwen talks about forgiveness. He says it really well. Forgiveness is to allow the other person not to be God. That's good. To forgive other people for being able to give only a little love is a hard discipline. But if we can, this is the place where actual Christianity breaks down so quickly. We move churches, we move groups, we move neighborhoods, we quit talking to people, we close our garage door before we get out of the car because we don't want to talk to people that we have any problem with. We don't work out anything anymore. And there's so much power in forgiving and being forgiven. And if I come into a group full, I'm God's beloved, then I can have a difficult conversation with you in love. And I can allow you not to be God, and you can allow me not to be God, and we can embrace the fact that neither of us have the love and the perfection that we get from God. And so we move from solitude, where we're full, naturally into community. And when we're there and we're forgiving each other and we're safe and we can be open and we can live in the light, then we can begin to celebrate one another's gifts without compromise and without competition. And now what you have is a group that is naturally overflowing. When you have that going on, ministry it's inevitable. It's inevitable, particularly if it's born out of gospel. Now, if we really like each other, we can become closed and secretive, and we don't want anybody else in. But if we've heard God call us His beloved, and we come into community and we're giving and being given to, and we're celebrating, there's always room for more. In actuality, it's true. In actuality, it's very true. Because if I know that I can be forgiven, I know I don't have to be perfect, I know I can come and offload a celebration that will be welcomed. Here's what's happened. Now I'm free. I'm no longer afraid. I can love and share the gospel. I will love and share the gospel because I have a community from which life is exploding. So the natural movement, don't miss it, is from solitude to community to ministry. Now one suggests that ministry can be expressed in two words: gratitude and compassion. Gratitude is I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful for you, my neighbor, who knows Jesus or doesn't. I'm thankful for you, my workmate, who drives me nuts. He has a great line about community I missed, I want to share. And he doesn't claim it. Community is the place where the person you least want to live always lives. Right? They're right there in your group. They're right there. I thought we picked everybody. I thought we handpicked them so we could be this awesome group. And somebody else snuck in to make sure that the gospel has to be put on display. Right? And so when you get to ministry, there's gratitude, you're grateful, and you're compassionate. Compassion is to share, passion is suffering. Compassion is to share in someone's suffering. Jesus released his disciples. It says there were all these people. So we go from being alone at night on the mountain to being in community with a group of people to then overwhelmed a large crowd, a great number of people from different areas. They're all around him. They came to hear him. They came to be healed by him. They came to touch him. That's exhausting. Unless you yourself are full and your community is full, then it's no problem. Then it's no problem at all. And actually, there's healing that can go on. Not like Jesus might have done, but my goodness, we talk about having seasons of spiritual healing. They often take place today, maybe in a counselor's office, but usually it's over long periods of conversation where I'm safe to put out my feelings, to forgive and be forgiven, to celebrate and be celebrated, to have and share gratitude, and to be compassionate. Group life can be so healing because there's gratitude and there's compassion. Here's my closing sentence here. Boom. Ministry is the natural overflow of knowing we are God's beloved who live in community, forgiving and celebrating each other. We're no longer afraid, but free to love and to share ourselves in the gospel. This is what you guys are doing week in and week out. Some of you have seen it played out over and over again. But when your group is full, You're living in the light. There's transparency, there's honesty, there's celebration. It's going to explode out. And as a church, we don't want to just grow to grow. We want life change to happen. We want the gospel to impact people so it becomes not a secondary or third issue in their life, a box to check off, a meeting to schedule. But it is life. Community is never an event. Community is always the way we live and share life together. Always. And so you guys are doing it. And I want to just encourage you to lead with that rhythm. If you can't give what you don't have. So if you come to the group and you're just totally exhausted and you are the vacuum, well, it'll only be a matter of time before your group suffers, dies, and collapses. But if you model it, then what will happen is the group will grow in strength, and then inevitably it'll spill over into ministry. One of my mentors, Leighton Ford, says, ministry is what you do as you follow in the footsteps of Jesus. It's what you leave behind. We often think of it as a program or something we do. It's an extension of who we are and how we live. And it's visible and tangible and experiential in community. So be generous with Jesus. He's been generous with you. Tori, that's all I've got.